welcome to the latest episode of Sports Talk, Law Talk. Myself and Jody. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Hey, man, I've been better. I've had a really fucked up week, and it started rough. And I haven't even told Jody what I'm about to tell. So my house is shaped like a U. And when you drive up down the street, which is really the only street to take to my house, you can't see the garage door, okay? You'll see why that's highly relevant. So one day I'm coming home. We moved into this house 5-6 months ago. So we've been in the house 2 to 3 months. I'm driving up. I hit the button. I pull into the driveway, and I close the garage door on my wife. And so it bent the bottom panel of the garage door. So for the last 2 to 3 months, I'm not blaming it on my wife, although this is the one part I could, is I said, hey, babe, you need to get that garage door fixed. Something's going to fucking happen, and it's going to be worse, right? So Monday, I think I do what probably every normal person does with a garage door is I walk into my garage, I hit the button, and then for me, I go around to the passenger side. I always put my gym bag and gym shoes in the passenger side. I walk around to the driver's side. My point is there's enough time that I never have to check if the garage door is open because it's always open. Yeah. So I throw it in the drive, and my windows are so tinted, again, my fault. So I can't see anything behind me really, right? So it's always a little bit of a guessing game. But I'm at my own house. So like I typically I know like there's nothing behind me, right? Except this time the garage door was only half open and I destroyed it, man. Like, I don't know if you saw the post from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and he had an issue with like his gate. And so then he had to go record a movie or something. So he's just trying to tear down the gate. So yeah, that was me Monday morning. I realized that my wife wasn't going to be able to go anywhere. My kids weren't going to be able to go to school. We were trapped in our house because I destroyed the garage door.
So, okay, I got a lot of questions about this real quick. When you throw it in, I'm assuming you throw it in reverse, right? So you're not a weirdo that backs into your own garage. Okay. So you throw it into reverse. Most of the time, if you've ever bumped into something, the first second you feel contact, it's like slamming on the brakes. Yeah. Take me to that moment where the first time you realized you're making, like, what was the oh shit level when you knew you had just backed into something?
Well, I didn't. That's the thing, because I drive a 1990 full-size Bronco. So like that garage door really didn't bump my truck. You know what I mean? Like I just started going through it, but I could feel, what stopped me was I felt like there was more tension. You know what I mean? Like I could tell my truck wasn't moving the way it should. So then I put it into drive, and I remember thinking, I'm like, come on, like, what did I hit? Like, and then I opened my door, and I saw the garage door destroyed, and I was like, oh fuck, I hit the garage door. Like,
so you didn't even know at that point you would hit the garage door? Like you're getting out of your car, and you're still not fully aware that you just literally drove through your garage door.
And like, you might be thinking, like, and to your point, the garage door guy shows up, and he's like, this is the worst garage door I've ever seen in my career. So yeah.
Did you keep backing up and like drive to work or did it mess up your car too? Because I imagine at that point your concern is probably more with the car than it is the garage door.
Right. My Bronco is my baby. So it scratched it a little, but my paint guy said he can fix it. So it didn't, like, really best case scenario for the Bronco, worst case scenario for the garage door. But this is the thing, man. So, like, I'm interested. I think I already know your answer to this. So the new garage door is going to cost me $2,400, which is obviously a kick in the teeth, right? So then they tell me, they're like, oh, we can give you a temporary door. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I'll have a temporary door. So then they send me an invoice for $1,200 for the temporary door. And I'm like,
oh my God,
fuck this. I'm like, why the fuck would I pay half of what I'm going to pay for the replacement door just to have a temporary door? And like, so my wife was dealing with the guy. So I just said to her, I'm like, yeah, just tell him like, that makes no sense. And maybe they'll give it to us for free. Right. So she's like, yeah, that doesn't really make sense. He goes, yeah, I don't know why anybody does it, but we just won't do it. And then I was like, okay, cool, man. But yeah, that was.
Hey, I'll sell you a temporary door for $500. Yeah. It's a fucking couple curtain rods and like a piece of a tarp or something like that. That's a temporary garage door, right?
Well, that's what I would think. I was like, I don't know why I would pay like 12. Like that's a lot of money to pay for something like that's temporary while you're waiting for the permanent thing. And like, I feel like if they're in the business and they're really worried about customer service, is like,
don't offer it.
Right? Don't offer it, or offer it for like $200. Like
throw it in.
The cost of a guy to come and put it in, whatever you pay that guy, and make a little money off of me. I'm not mad at that.
Yeah.
But like $1,200, it makes no sense.
So I have a question here that I don't know how comfortable you're going to be diving into the dynamics of the Brown household, but I think you might have buried the lead on this a little bit for some people that are watching.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple times like, I told my wife the garage door's broken. I'm going to let my wife handle it. And then even afterwards, like, my wife is the one that worked. So is this how it works? Like, does she just take on everything in the house? Like, you broke the garage door. You drove through it. And you're like, oh, my wife will handle it. Is that how it goes in the Brown household?
Honestly, it does. It does. Like, whatever. And we have pretty clean lines in our relationship, which I think helps it, is anything with the house, I leave to her. And it's funny, to this point, I'll be honest, man, even about the garage door thing, I said to her, I was like, hey, I'll call and get it done. She goes, no, I got it. She's like, it's my job, I'll do it. I was like, okay, cool. So I'm very deferential to her about all of the house things, like what she wants in the house, what decorations, whatever, because that's what she does. She stays home and she takes care of the girls, and like, I feel like that's her world, right? And likewise, whenever it comes to like business or like anything like that, she really doesn't tell me anything. So if I wanted to start a new business or buy something for the business or do something, like, she never questions it at all. So that works for us. But I thought that makes sense. I thought you were going more towards, sound like you were really kind of trying to blame your wife. And there's part of me that wants to blame my wife. But at the end of the day, because I could sit here and say, if she fixed the garage door timely, I would have never driven through it. But I feel like that'd be really rude of me, because I mean, at the end of the day, I'm the one who drove through it, and I really don't. Her fixing it, I can't.
I think if you're not like willing to jump in and be hands on or however it works, like, and more power to your wife for taking care of those things. Like, if you're not willing to jump in, I don't think you can be critical that it didn't get fixed in time, right? Like, I had this issue on a much smaller scale over the summer. My wife and I were at a friend's house swimming. I was driving, but she had the car keys. She left the car keys in the center console. It's 115 fucking degrees out. We've got both kids. It's lunchtime and nap time. And we go to get in the car, and it's locked. And I'm like, where are the keys? And she's like, they're in the car. And I'm like, holy shit. And she was saying, I wanted to blame her, because I'm like, put the keys in your fucking pocket where a normal human being keeps their keys. Yeah. And then I realized, like, I was the driver. I was probably equally responsible for the keys. So I think in that case, he's like, in your case, in my case, we don't play the blame game. We just suck it up and figure it out. Well, and
right? I'm happy with my wife. And so, like, the last thing I want to do is make her feel a certain way, right? It's just not worth it. I always say, like, is the juice worth the squeeze? That's not a fight I'm gonna fight.
Do you have any responsibilities around the home whatsoever? Come on, like, Byron, do you take out the trash? Do you, like, fix anything? Like, if, let's say there's like, oh shit, the garbage disposal is not working, like, do you A, are you able to fix those sorts of things, or B, are you immediately like, either let's call someone or I'll let you handle it?
So I am not handy at all. I'm willing to admit that, man. So, like, anything that goes wrong in the house, like, I mean, if it was like, hey, like, if we're putting a dimmer on a light, I can do that. You know, I'm assuming I could probably figure out like a garbage disposal, but yeah, for the most part, I know a handyman that I hired to do stuff around my office and my house, and like, I'll call him to do some of those. But like tonight, I think I'm gonna hang all the Christmas lights. So there are things that I do, but the reason why I'm laughing is they're very minimal. I can't sit here and tell you, like, I'm not the guy who takes out the trash all the time. I do on occasion, but like, mostly it's my wife, you know? And like, I even ask her, I'll be like, hey, like, can I help out? And she's like, no, we're good. And so maybe
right,
I should do more.
listen, whatever works. I'm jealous of that deal. I don't know how you pulled it off, but hey, more power to you.
Yeah. Well, I know it works for us. Like I always say, you know what I mean? Like whatever works for whoever.
It works for you.
Right. Yeah. It works for her too, Jody. It works for her. But hey, so the thing is like on the weekend, I had the Christmas party for my office. And then Monday I tear down my garage door, but the Christmas party went off without a hitch. I posted a picture of it on the internet. It went good. No one got too intoxicated except there is one story. So I'm standing next to one dude. I'm talking to his wife. And then I'm out of my peripheral, I see him just fall. Like out cold.
This happens a lot at your holiday parties.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. Last year we had the girl hit her head on the door. So he fell and he was out cold. And then he finally got him up and stuff, and we were talking to him, and he goes, and then finally he just says to me, he goes, I'm out. And I was like, what? And he like speed walked out of my house, grabbed his jacket out the door, and I'm trying to find his wife, and she's highly intoxicated too. And we got everyone Ubers to make sure everyone got home safe. So I was like, I thought maybe two drunk people in an Uber was safer than one drunk person in an Uber. So I was like, hey, you got to go and get him. So she had her high heels on the ground, in like with a little stiletto and like the back strap. So as she's leaned over, she's trying to pick him up with her fingers like this, right? She'd catch the loop on one, but then knock the other over. And so she'd have to start the process over again, right? So she did that 3 to 4 times. And I'm standing there in silence just watching her, right? My wife is, and I got some other friends there that are watching. And she hasn't looked up the entire time. And then all of a sudden she just goes, stop fucking staring at me. And I just laughed hysterically because like she didn't look. She could feel the heat, right, from us staring at her. And it was classic, man. It was a classic moment. But it went off good. Everyone enjoyed themselves. It was a little bit of I'm a pretty private guy when it comes to like my personal life and like my house. So that was the most people I've ever had in my house. Probably will never have that many people in my house again. But it was really good. It was really fun. We had a lot of fun.
I always want to be like, this was in college mostly, but this applies too. I never want to be the host of the party because I feel like the cleanup and the possibility, like, was there any damage to the house? Did anybody like fuck up the furniture or like spill something? Or, I mean, if people are passing out on the wall, that's how drunk they got. The odds are some shit happened at some point in the house, right? Or is that not true?
You know what? You'd actually be surprised, man. Like everything was fairly neat. We had, as I'm trying to think, like we had a catering crew, so they cleaned up, most of the stuff. And then we had a bartender and a DJ, and like they cleaned up their stuff. So when they were left, we rented a bunch of like tables and chairs and stuff and linens. And then my wife and the girls in the morning cleaned all that up even before I got out of bed. So it actually worked out really well.
So you didn't find anybody like wandering into your master bedroom, like going through your drawers or something?
No, I think it might have helped that I was like the boss, so I think people were like, we don't want to fuck around with the boss's house. So I think that that inured to my benefit. But everyone was happy. You know who wasn't happy though? People who saw Michael Vick on TV. So if anyone's not familiar with the Michael Vick story, here's my 2 cents. Because I'm a dog lover, okay? I'm a dog lover, but I'm also someone who I think has benefited from second chances in life. And the reason why I say that is when I saw the Michael Vick shit back when it happened, whatever, a decade ago, it feels like, I was appalled. And I was like, you know what? That motherfucker, like he deserves everything that comes his way because he was obviously doing awful things to animals that can't defend themselves, right? But then he sought out Tony Dungy, and Tony Dungy's a man of faith, and I've heard Tony Dungy talk about Michael Vick on many of occasions and speak of him very proudly about how he turned his life around. The other thing a lot of people might not know about Michael Vick, when all that dog fighting shit happened, he had endorsements, and he owed Nike and I think another company that had given him sponsor money because obviously he couldn't fulfill his contract because he wasn't able to play football. He declared bankruptcy, but he declared the sort of bankruptcy that didn't wipe out his debt to Nike and these other sponsors, which is obviously a stand-up thing. Nothing prevented him from including them within his bankruptcy, which then he wouldn't have to pay back millions of dollars. I'm not talking like tens of or hundreds, like millions of dollars. And he did that. So in my eyes, I remember thinking, you know what, really good. Like, because that's what we want, right? We send people to prison to reform them. And I feel like Michael Vick is showing us on every level that he's reformed. He goes and talks at events related to animal abuse. I mean, I honestly feel like the guy couldn't have turned his life around better. If he was an F student, he turned it around into an AA plus in my mind. Then he was just featured on Sunday Night Football or something like that with Tony Gonzalez and the other host, who I'm forgetting his name. And Michael Vick was on there. And a lot of people got upset because of his past. They're saying that he shouldn't have been on TV. And, you know, they're coming after, I think it was an NBC broadcast. Apologies to NBC if I'm wrong, but I believe it was an NBC broadcast. Like, listen, I think I've already told you my position, but my position is, like, look at the guy did everything. He served his time. I think he did more than he was legally obligated to do. And in fact, he could have found outs to make his life easier, but he lived up to his obligations, irrespective of the shitty decisions he made in life. And now he's come out and he's a better person and he's a productive member of society. I don't know how anybody, honestly, I don't know how anybody could be mad at that. Like, so the guy, like, you want to keep punishing him forever for something he did? If that's your idea, then you got to fucking rewrite the whole justice system.
Yeah, I totally agree, and like I think there is a strong segment of the population that will never forgive him because, as you mentioned, I mean, these were heinous crimes committed against dogs, and the details are as disturbing as it gets. Now, we also learned through that process there's a lot more culturally to dogfighting that I think people aren't totally aware of, depending on your socioeconomic background and where you are in the country. It's not an excuse or a justification because wrong is wrong, but I agree. Like, Mike Vick has started to make, in the last, 18 months or so, a bit of a media comeback. When Kyler Murray was drafted by the Cardinals, I had a chance to speak to Mike Vick about Kyler. Like, people seek him out because the NFL is evolving in a way where quarterbacks are more similar to Mike Vick now than any quarterback since. And I agree with you. I think the words he says carry more weight because he did prison time. He paid millions in debt, and not, 3 months at some white collar prison. He did years at Leavenworth in the middle of, nowhere. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I at this point, I know some people will never forgive him, but I tip my cap to him for instead of becoming another statistic or another example of how horrible things go, he's turned it and got back on track.
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly what you just said. I mean, like, the guy did real time, and that's the way the system's set up. It's to reform people. I mean, we want people to come out and be productive members of society. And I think everybody who's being critical of Michael Vick, if they were asked that question, meaning if someone goes to the jail and they serve their time, is that the goal of the justice system? I think most people would agree with it, but now they're seeing it play out in real life and they're not happy with it.
Yeah, if you're criticizing Michael Vick now, you're not criticizing Michael Vick, the dog fighting, dog killing Mike Vick. You're criticizing, like, Mike Vick, an example of what anyone would want out of anyone in a second chance. And it's two totally different people. And so it's almost saying more about the people who are criticizing him than it is saying about Mike Vick.
I would agree. Yeah. And to your point, a wrong is a wrong. And I think Ohio is in the wrong here. Although I guess you can't really blame it. So my understanding is the Big Ten, their requirements, you probably know this better than I, Jody. So what's going on with Ohio and the Big Ten?
Once college football came back, each conference still had a conference championship game. The Big Ten decided as a group, before the season started, you would have to play in at least 6 games to be eligible to play in the Big Ten championship game. So Ohio State has played 5 games this season. Their 6th game was against Michigan, which is the biggest rivalry game in college football. That game was canceled because Michigan had 45 players in COVID protocols and could not play this weekend. And so instead of rescheduling or postponing it, they canceled it, meaning earlier this week, Ohio State was 5-0, the 4th-ranked team in the country, but according to Big Ten rules, was ineligible to play in the Big Ten championship game, which would have likely then prevented them from being in the college football playoff. And then as we're about to talk about, the Big Ten agreed yesterday, earlier this week, that they are going to change the rules on the fly. They're going to grant Ohio State an opportunity to play in the championship game despite the fact they don't meet the criteria. And Ohio State will now play Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game with 5 games played as opposed to 6 games.
Oh, yeah, man. I'll be honest. I don't follow college football as much as others. And this whole playoff scenario has always kind of baffled me. But what you just explained to me seems like the system is rigged in favor of particular teams, in this circumstance, Ohio State. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's like crazy.
If we put it in courtroom terms, like this would be like you just got done with a case or anyone gets done with the case and it's an average Joe and they're like, all right, you're going to prison for 2 years. You broke the law. And then a celebrity walks in and they're like, oh, you can walk out of here because you're special, even though it's the exact same offense. And that's basically, Ohio State got special treatment. But they're also a team that has consistently contended for the college football championship. We know they're one of the 4 best teams in the country. And it was an arbitrary rule in the first place that was only implemented because they were trying to do the right thing with COVID affecting. They just didn't know how much. It's been deeper of a shift because so many games have been postponed. So I don't have a problem with it, even though you're right. It is preferential treatment and it is rigged, but Ohio State's one of the best teams in the country, and I think they deserve the right to play for it.
But why not the first place team then? Like, I'm just like, you say they're 5-0, they're the 4th place team. How does it work where
in the country?
Yeah.
So they're 4th in the country. They are, along with Northwestern, the 2 best teams in the Big Ten.
I got you.
So they in their conference, they're by record the best team because they're the only undefeated team in there. And then in the country, they choose the top 4 to play in the college football playoff. Had they not been eligible to play in the Big Ten championship game, they likely would have been knocked out of the college football playoff. So the Big Ten, and this is the world of college football, Byron. We've talked about it ad nauseum. It's a selfish, fatally flawed group. But if Ohio State gets in the college football playoff, it's literally tens of millions of dollars of additional money going to the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So they're not doing this out of the spirit of competition or the kindness of their hearts. They're doing it because they see Ohio State as their gravy train to get more money, and that's the system. And they're gaming the system that was already gaming the system. And I think you almost have to tip your cap to them.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. You know who else is from Ohio? Logan Paul.
Your guy.
When you talk about all about money, man, Logan Paul and Mayweather. Those are the 2 things. And it's interesting. I'm going to give you my 2 cents on it. I think Logan Paul deserves to get the title shot. I know it's not a title shot. But listen to my reasoning might be different than you think. I think Logan Paul, you got to give him the benefit of he's created something by himself, right? He's built a brand. He makes millions of dollars around his own persona. And that buildup that he did, starting with those little videos in Ohio in his basement, has now built him up to a point where he has had one professional fight that was a draw, and he's booked a fight against literally the best boxer in the world who's 50-0. And I think you got to give him credit for that, because if you're Mayweather, why not get paid multi-millions of dollars to fight someone who on no level is scary? And if you're Logan Paul, someone wants to pay you millions of dollars to step in a ring with Mayweather, and they're going to have some sort of gentleman's agreement, I bet, that no one's really going to throw hard punches or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I want to see Mayweather knock out Logan Paul. But if you're Logan Paul, why wouldn't you do it? I mean, you ask around to anybody, And most people I know would take probably a couple $100,000 to take a punch and get knocked out.
Here's what I don't understand, right? Here, and you got to answer this for me. How does this not completely tarnish Floyd Mayweather's legacy, who is arguably one of, I don't know, considered one of, if you know, one of the greatest pound for pound fighters in boxing history? He's a defensive fighter. He's not a guy that's got a lot of like amazing moments in his career, but he's undefeated. He's never been beaten. How does this not tarnish his legacy if he doesn't knock this dude out within the first 2 minutes of the fight? Because this is, by all intents and purposes, this is a random dude who's in good shape but not really a boxer fighting one of the greatest boxers of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think if he doesn't put a beating on Logan Paul, that it does tarnish his legacy. But at the same time, I don't know if anybody will consider this fight as part of his legacy. You know, he's not fighting a real boxer.
Yeah.
He's fighting someone who fought and like literally he fought another YouTuber and it's a draw. So I don't know how anybody on any level can take it seriously. Now, I've heard a lot of boxers being irritated about it, and this is what I got to say to all the boxers. It's like, look in the fucking mirror, man. Like, if you're upset that Logan Paul is getting the shot that he wants, I'll tell you what, Logan Paul is doing better than anybody in boxing right now, is promoting the hell out of himself to the point that people are willing to watch him fight. If you're like, that's your whole fucking life, right? To try to win fights. Well, also part of it, it's a business, and people need to want to buy a fight to watch you. If no one knows who you are and you're not making yourself relevant, then I don't know how you have any right to bitch and moan about Logan Paul getting a shot, because like I'm a big proponent of there's no free lunches out there. No one's going to come around and help you. You have to go out there and get it yourself. So I say to all these boxers, it's like, man, go out there and get it. Like, that's what Logan Paul did. You know, like you can hate the guy as much as you want, but the one thing you can't take away from him is he built his shit.
I get your point. I understand it. And I agree with you that it's impressive from Logan Paul's, but like, boxing is supposed to be a meritocracy, right? You're supposed to earn everything you get in boxing. You got to work your way up. You got to start at the lower rung, work your way up to the top rung. Dudes are getting their brains beaten in. They're working their ass off, and they'll never get a chance like this to make money. And to your point, did you see what Floyd Mayweather said about the Conor McGregor fight recently?
I don't think I did.
Like, Floyd Mayweather came out and said, like, I could have knocked Conor McGregor out anytime I wanted. Any moment I decided I didn't want to, because I wanted a rematch and I wanted to make more money. So like, Floyd Mayweather, from his perspective, was like, I could have knocked McGregor out anytime I wanted. And I kind of believe him, right? Like, they get to that level. So the reason I bring it up is because I feel like we were talking about earlier, you know, this being true with Michael Vick. I'm all for a good gimmicky boxing match. There's no fucking way I'm paying a cent for this fight. It's a sham. Yeah. It's clearly a cash grab for both parties involved. It says nothing about skill or competition or strength or anything. And I can't imagine people would want to pay. It's almost over the top, transparently insulting that it's a sham of a fight. I mean, do you think there would be a demand for this? It's not even close to being. At least Conor McGregor was a champion of fighting, and you could talk yourself into it. Logan Paul is not a fighter, a boxer. He's a YouTube guy. Would you pay money to watch this fight?
I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm going to or not, because the thing I learned from the Jake Paul fight was it wasn't like the entire fight was entertaining. The ending was entertaining, just like anything, right? A knockout is entertaining. So I feel like I don't want to watch Mayweather and Logan Paul box. I want to watch Logan Paul get knocked out. Now, does that result in me buying the entire pay-per-view or just waiting to watch someone post, you know, the 10-second clip of him getting knocked out? Because I think that's what's going to happen. I think I'm just going to wait and watch the clip. You know, I was entertained with the Tyson Roy Jones card, but to me it was like a sideshow, and I've seen it once. I don't need to see it again. And I don't know if people are going to have the same opinion as me, because I think the only way we're going to stop seeing these sort of sideshow boxing matches is if people stop buying them.
I agree.
Like, that's the only way. So we'll see what happens here with Mayweather and Logan Paul, because if the buys are less, then I think that's a sign that this was a fad and people are ready to move on. But if the buys are equal or more, you're just going to see more of these fucking fights. I'm going to have to throw my hat in the ring and fight Matthew McConaughey or something. Right.
Right. But that's the thing, is like, the packaging of this matters. Roy Jones and Mike Tyson was compelling because they're two of the all-time greatest fighters. They're just 50 plus. And so you knew that they're capable boxers. When Mayweather fought Manny Pacquiao, finally, after years and years, we knew it wasn't going to be the same fight it could have been. It had happened years earlier, but you still wanted to see it because, again, you knew they were two great fighters. Like, this is an awful, awful boxer who trades in attention, like you said, basically just taking a paycheck to get knocked out. I would watch the Twitter highlight of that. I would watch the 10-second video, but there's zero chance I would pay a dime to watch this on TV. It's a sham.
Yeah, well, we're going to find out. I mean, one person who's maybe hated as much as Logan Paul, although that's a tall task, Dan Snyder. The Washington football team, I almost referred to it as its old name. Dan Snyder's in hot water again. What can you tell us about that, Jody?
So we know that Dan Snyder's been embroiled in a bunch of controversy surrounding improper behavior within the organization, sexual harassment, cheerleaders. There were allegations that they had taken like a trip down to some beach and improperly videotaped the cheerleaders. And there's been a lot of investigative work done on this. Most recently, the Washington Post reported that Dan Snyder had previously made a confidential settlement involving similar allegations that had previously been unreported. And so this is adding another log onto the fire that the Redskins have been a disaster and a terrible workplace under Dan Snyder. Now, Snyder's trying to keep the terms of that confidential settlement under seal and private. And so my question for you is, who do you think wins that fight? I don't know if it matters that there's other allegations and maybe a judge would say, hey, this is relevant because if this is showing a pattern of behavior, or is there an ironclad black and white, like this was done confidentially, it stays confidential?
You know what's weird is I've never dealt with this particular issue on every level. And what I mean by that is, so what I think happened with Dan Snyder, and again, this is complete speculation on my part as it relates to the agreement because we don't know what happened, but there was obviously a dispute that he resolved via a confidential settlement agreement. And whenever you sign one of those confidential settlement agreements, there's always a clause within that agreement that says that the parties will not reveal anything to anyone else other than if it's a court order, right? Or other compelling reasons. And other compelling reasons is just a catch-all. Normally, really what you mean is a court order. So, Dan Snyder, and again, I'm not advocating for him, I'm just saying what his options are is he's contractually prohibited from producing that information. And what it means by that is because the other party to that contract might not want any of the information to be disseminated to anybody for whatever reason. And obviously we don't know, right? But let's assume that it is a female, and let's assume that that female was the victim of some abhorrent behavior. Then you could see how maybe that female would not want the information to be out for privacy, embarrassment, whatever reason, right? So people can hate on Dan Snyder, but if he didn't do what he's doing, then that female could argue that he's breaching their agreement. So it's a little bit more complicated than I think people think on first blush, because they could just go, well, Dan Snyder's being an ass. Well, he isn't, because he's living up to the terms of his contract. Now, you can say that that's bullshit and it's an easy way out, and I'm not going to disagree with you on it, but that is the situation he's in. So now we have a judge who has to rule, and you bring up relevancy, and you've hit the nail on the head. So that judge is being asked to determine whether there's any compelling reasons to essentially undo this confidentiality agreement, and that there's no lawsuit or anything pending, right? And I've talked about this before. So Schneider's lawyer filed an intervener, and what an intervener essentially says is like, look, there's a legal issue that's going on. It doesn't directly involve me, but it ancillarily involves me, and the outcome of it could negatively impact me. So I'm going to intervene as a party of interest within this issue, because if I don't, my rights could be negatively impacted. So that's what the lawyer did. And that lawyer has also said that Schneider's about to intervene, because the lawyer intervening by himself, trying to keep the attorney-client privilege on wraps, doesn't seem like, from the articles I'm reading at least, doesn't seem to be as persuasive as he hopes with the judge. So I think what we're seeing is Schneider's going to come and intervene. He'll make whatever arguments, and I'm sure they'll make them under seal. And what under seal means is when there is confidential information that a judge needs to review, they don't review it in open court, because in open court, everybody can hear. So then what you do is you produce things to the judge under seal, so it's only for his or her eyes, and then they review it, and then they make a decision. And they call that in camera, meaning the judge will review the documents in camera. Really what that means is in their office, they're going to review it, and the parties submit briefs. There's no oral argument usually on it. The judge reads the briefs. If the judge has questions, he or she can bring the lawyers in to ask questions, and then the judge will make a decision about whether that information has to be disseminated. So the reason why it's important that there's no lawsuit is, I think it's going to be tough for a judge to rule that the information needs to be disseminated because there's no active lawsuit. It's the NFL is conducting an investigation that they took over from the Washington football team, so the Washington football team couldn't hide behind attorney-client privilege. And by all accounts, at least, other than this little snafu, Dan Schneider and the Washington football team have been very open. There's NDAs that Dan Schneider has waived, meaning non-disclosure agreements that the team has signed with various people. They've waived all of those. So I really think this is something, I understand the people viewing it as Dan Schneider being, kind of a scumbag, but I also see, if I'm Dan Schneider's lawyer, the benefit and the need for him to defend and fight for himself, which I think most people would agree with. Even if you agree with his stance, we all have rights that need to be protected. And that's, from a legal standpoint at least, that's what you're seeing happen with Dan Schneider. So the result of all of this, I think we'll find out here in probably the new year. I don't think in my profession this month and the end of last month goes fairly quiet just with the holidays. So I think we're going to see something from this judge in the new year as it relates to that information.
So it sounds like this is another reason, like you pointed out, to believe that Dan Snyder and the Redskins probably ran a pretty shitty organization, but it's not the smoking gun that's going to compel Dan Snyder to have to sell the team once and for all. That's not what this appears to be based on what we know.
Correct. And this is a circumstance, I think, all the hate against Dan Schneider might help Dan Schneider. And what I mean by that is, you have to have compelling legal reasons and facts supported by the law for a judge to render a decision in your favor. And judges, don't like a lot of drama and fighting. And so it'll be interesting, though, because we're living in a new political culture than ever, where even what a judge may or may not rule could draw negative implications for that judge. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing. And I think this could set a precedent in cases like this, because lawyers like myself, when we enter into settlement agreements, we want them and we intend for them to be confidential. So when these things arise, can be a learning experience for judges, because then you might have to do different things to protect your clients. It's tricky, but we'll see how this judge navigates it. It's definitely an interesting topic, and I'm interested to see what the judge does.
It sounds like, and this is like the non-legal perspective, the outside the legal world looking in, it sounds like Dan Snyder is still rich enough and powerful enough to not make some sloppy mistake that would have allowed this to immediately pop up. Like, he knows how to vacuum seal his other shitty examples of leadership well enough that they're not going to bite him in the ass later. And so it pays to probably have the best lawyers and billions of dollars at your disposal to make sure, okay, I dealt with that mistake. Let's make sure that mistake isn't going to trigger some other issue. And there's legal maneuverings, it sounds like, for Dan Snyder to lawfully and legally maneuver around so that he doesn't have to worry about it biting him in the ass.
Yeah, I mean, and this is another perfect example. Maybe you call it white privilege, maybe you call it rich privilege, but we saw it with Robert Kraft. He had enough money to hire the lawyers. I think we all think that he got that hand job, blow job, whatever happened, because you don't fight as hard as he fought if you did nothing. And he was successful, at least so far. I think that's been concluded, where that video hasn't come out. And I think we're probably going to see the same thing with Dan Schneider. When you have the money to hire high-priced legal team to defend you, you usually end up with a result that you're happy with. But with Robert Kraft, you know, Tom Brady got into some legal issues recently. Nothing to do with him, but someone broke into his house. It was the same guy who actually, do you remember back when someone tried to steal Tom Brady's Super Bowl jersey? It was the same dude. So he has a big heart for Mr. Tom Brady. I'll put it that way.
Heart or heart?
Well, I was gonna.
Which one?
I think I was flipping between those two words. But a heart on or a heart on, he loves his Tom Brady.
Remember the slides I showed you?
Jimmy!
They have things.
Oh, you smell like a winner. You smell like a USA.
Was the guy even punished? Because I know it's the same guy, but for the Super Bowl incident, was he even punished?
I don't remember. I don't think he faced any like real world legal he might have been like banned from Foxborough or like banned from season tickets, but I don't think he faced any legal consequences.
You know what surprises me about the whole thing is when you read the article, it's his house in Massachusetts, and obviously he's with his family in Florida because he's playing for Tampa. So the caretakers on his ground noticed the intruder, because I guess the intruder got into the house and was like laying in a bed or on a couch or something like that, which is really wild because like Tom Brady's married to the biggest model in the world and Tom Brady is Tom Brady. I'm just surprised. Like, I'm not saying that security should be like the White House, but it is surprising that someone was able to infiltrate Tom Brady, it has to be a compound, right? It has to be a huge piece of property. He has to have security cameras and stuff. So someone was able to make it all the way into the house, onto furniture. Great thing his family wasn't there, but that's odd. Like, he has no security guard. He has no, security dogs. It just kind of baffles me.
Listen, where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Yeah.
So this dude has now proven that true multiple times. If I'm Tom Brady, I don't want to take a black light to that couch. Like, the last thing I want to do is like turn on the black light, burn the couch, get rid of it. Like this, everything in there, you now have to assume has been the target of this man's passion for all things Tom Brady. Now, in all seriousness, if you're Tom Brady, and we know he's used to the trappings of fame, and you mentioned Giselle, this is pretty fucking terrifying that this guy has now, on two separate instances, he's clever enough and capable enough to worm his way in to the inner sanctum of Tom Brady's life. Like, I don't know what the legal repercussions, like, I know that, restraining orders exist and everything, but like, this dude shouldn't be allowed within like 1,000 miles of Tom Brady because he's clearly capable of doing some fucked up shit.
Well, and that's kind of what I went back to about the Super Bowl punishment, because the guy was clever enough and had the balls enough to somehow get into the dressing room and grab the jersey and leave with the dressing room. And you think at that point in time, I think a judge would have granted Tom Brady a restraining order, but obviously he would have to apply for it. And maybe he didn't. He seems like that sort of guy, like maybe laid back and just said, hey, look, the guy made a mistake. Let's not punish him. I'm sure that's Tom Brady. But now, to your point, that's terrifying. I live in a guard-gated community, and so you would think it'd be hard to get into my community. One morning I woke up, and there was a guy in my front courtyard, and his door was open on his car, and I opened my door, and I'm like, hey, can I help you? And he didn't speak English. He wasn't obviously supposed to be at my house. It was early enough that the security guard somehow let him in despite his inability to speak English or explain where he was going. And my wife and kids came up and I was like, hey girls, like stay in the back. And I closed the door and then, Papa Bear kicks in and he's not leaving. And my girls wonder what's going on. So like I raised my voice a little, and then I raised it a little bit more until he realized, he's making a bad decision, and he turned around and walked away. But that stuff is scary. Now listen, that happened to little Byron Brown in Gilbert, Arizona is one thing, but like Tom Brady, I don't think the guy wanted to do me any harm. Maybe at the worst, he wanted to steal something from my house. But like when someone's that infatuated with someone else and they're stealing your jersey, they're breaking in their house and they're sleeping on your couch or doing whatever else he was doing in the house, that's a little terrifying.
Maybe he was just at your house because he knew there was going to be a garage door eventually. Like he's like, hey, I heard this is the house where the guy drives through the garage door.
Yeah, well, hey, look at man, if he would have come now, he'd be able to probably walk right in and rob the place. But we will leave it at that today. For Jody and myself, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Please check out our channel on YouTube to subscribe. Also on Instagram, if you go into our bio, you can click the link in there to subscribe. As always, we appreciate the support. And if you got any legal questions, sports questions for Jody and I, please shoot them our direction. We'll happily answer them. Thank you.